Hey everyone, today is going to be an exciting day because today is going to begin a new journey on this channel following this Palmetto State Armory rifle in the cheapest possible configuration that I could get it at. Basically my goal was $500 or less, and we're going to be starting the testing with it today. Now this is going to be hopefully a series of videos today just with a good break-in, about 500 rounds, running it through a battery of drills that I've learned through my time taking training classes, just getting it hot, continuing to run it hot, because that's where I see guns fail. Now, I want to start by saying right now things are pretty quiet because the range just opened. However, I am on a live range, so that may affect the audio quality. I'm doing the best I can. I'm trying to double up on mics and hopefully we'll get some good audio. Now, I know a lot of you, this is going to be your first introduction to my channel, so you probably don't care about my whole spiel here at the beginning. So there will be timestamps in the description and hopefully on screen. So if you want to just get to the part where I start shooting this thing or just wrap up my thoughts on it, hopefully that will be an option available to you. For those of you who want my editorialized version of this, then feel free to keep watching. So I want to start by saying like how this started. If you've been following my channel for a while, you know that I think the cheapest AR-15 that I've ever featured on the channel in a review format is about $1,200. So this one coming in right at $500, as you can see configured, maybe plus or minus $10 or so. Is kind of a departure from what I typically do. And also those of you who know me personally know that I've never been a huge proponent of Palmetto State Armory AR-15s. So how did we get to where we are, where this is in front of me and we're gonna be doing a bunch of shooting with it today? So basically this goes back to when Palmetto State Armory announced their Tyranny 15 lowers, which are the ones that have the F-15 logo, dropping some nukes in reference to something that our lovely president said about taking on the government. You would need F-15s and nukes. Being a former F-15 mechanic in the Air Force, you put an F-15 on something, I'm gonna buy it. That's just the way it works. So I went ahead and pre-ordered one of these. Fast forward 8 or 10 or however many weeks later, it actually shows up. We're at the gun store where I work, and I was, excited. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with this lower, and I was trying to think of what would be a good option, especially being the model being Tyranny 15. I was trying to think what would be the best way to embody the idea of an anti-tyranny AR-15 while staying within the bounds of the law, i.e. no third hole, which, we can argue about whether that's tyrannical or not. I'm on the side that it is. Anyway, so this whole thought process is taking place over a couple days, and shortly after that, we had this young woman come into the gun store, and she wanted to purchase her first handgun. Something had happened to her the night before. She felt that she needed a gun. Given her circumstances, I thought that was a wise choice. And the problem was literally the only gun she could afford that we had was a Hi-Point C9, like $200 9mm handgun. Now, I am never excited to sell anyone a Hi-Point C9. A lot of times people buy them because they're cheap and they just don't want to spend more money. In her case, it was literally what she could do. And so we went through the process. She took the gun home. And again, while I may not be excited about it, the reality is someone in her position is probably more likely to need to use a gun to defend herself than I am. So I would rather her have that than nothing. And that got me kind of thinking, well, as much as we all in the gun industry like to poo-poo the poors, there are people who legitimately cannot afford to spend $1,000, $1,100, $1,200, $1,500, $2,000 on an AR-15. Maybe they really can only afford $500, but they have the right mindset. They want to be able to be a patriot and have the ability to arm themselves and stand up if they need be to whatever is in front of them. And maybe this is legitimately what they can afford. And so again, while I may not be excited about that being the case, this is what a lot of people in reality have. And I was thinking about it as well, and honestly, a good way of fighting tyranny is lowering the barrier to entry for AR-15s, and that's something I think Palmetto State Armory does exceptionally well. again, for reference, I got the lower separately, and then the entire rest of the kit, minus the rear sight and the sling, because that's something I added, no magazine as well. I went with the cheapest possible build I could do. So this is a blemished Freedom upper kit. So it had the lower parts getting everything in it for 350 bucks. We'll get to full disclosures here in a second. The rear sight comes in, I think these are around 55 bucks. This thing was about 50 bucks. So all said and done, you can get what I would say a functioning, usable AR-15, maybe not a good fighting setup, but a usable AR-15 at $500. And again, this is what a lot of people have. So my goal as a reviewer and as someone who is a proponent of training and preparedness, someone who has this, what can you reasonably expect it to be able to do performance-wise? I apologize if the audio is getting weird here. What can you realistically expect this to be able to do performance-wise? So I don't plan on doing a torture test where I run this thing over or bury it in mud or bury it in dirt or anything like that. Yes, there's something to be gained from those tests, but my goal is, again, just run it through a battery of drills that I've learned through my time taking classes and things I've seen online and on Magpul DVDs perhaps, and just see how this thing holds up. And the reason I want to do it this way as opposed to just, you know, running a couple hundred rounds through it every weekend for however many months until I get it to a round count I want, is because when I've taken those classes, so for example, I was at a tactical response fighting rifle class. I wasn't taking the class, I was just doing videos and photos for it. A good number of people in the class had parts falling off of their AR-15s, especially the guys who'd built their own. And every single one of them had said that this was never an issue before. They had a whole bunch of rounds to their gun. They'd never had issues with parts falling off. And basically the explanation to them was, well, you've also never gotten your gun hot and continue to run it hot and given it the opportunity to find those issues. When guns get hot, things expand, things start walking out, screws start coming loose, castle nuts start coming loose, things start falling apart. So, you know, instructors like James Yeager and a lot of other ones who have pretty intense classes basically have a mobile armorer's unit to be able to put the guns back together for the students. And again, they did that for these students. They got their guns back in the fight and were able to continue the class. So that's my goal with this, is just give it some stressful testing, get it hot, but also run it through a realistic series of drills. As long as everything goes good in this first 500 rounds, we're going to then start upgrading it. So basically, all right, so you have this, now you have $150 to invest into it. Where's the smartest way to put that $150 into it? And then say another $100 to $200, and basically take baby steps until you have what should be at the end a pretty reasonable fighting rifle. So hopefully you join me in this journey. I know I've been talking for quite a while now, but I just wanted to let you guys understand where this is coming from. Now, I alluded to earlier, full disclosures. So I paid for the lower receiver itself. However, through talking with my contacts at Palmetto State Armory, they did provide the upper and kit for free. Again, it is a blemished upper, so we're definitely not getting a cherry-picked anything, but they did provide the rest of the gun around that, not including the rear sight, not including the sling. So the blemished Freedom kit, again, the $350, they did provide at no cost, but I'll be providing ammo and everything else. And again, documenting everything that happens along the way so that we can all learn together. So with that very long introduction out of the way, let's go ahead, get this thing on some bags, we'll get it sighted in, and then we'll start the fun. First shots through this thing. Wish me luck. I put a lot of oil on this thing yesterday. I wanted to give this thing no excuse to not work properly. So a lot of that is the excess burning off right now. Okay. We're about where I want, left to right. I'm going to move that target further down and get this thing actually on. gigs. I'll go ahead and take a picture of that 3-shot group. At least from here, it looks pretty good. This is just regular 55 grain Frontier ammo. Same thing I'm going to be shooting this whole time. So I'm going to be starting this process with steel cased ammo. This is some Bernal 55 grain 5.56 ammo. I figure if this thing is going to choke on steel case, it's going to be right out the gate. So we're going to see if we can get it to choke straight away. But I'm just got 3 targets set up downrange as a warm-up. Do a couple 2.24, 2.2s, 1 to 5, something like that. And then we'll start getting into more movement, barricades, all that kind of fun stuff. All right, so we're just over 180 rounds into it. Now, by no means is that an exhaustive test so far, but I figured it was time to reload mags. Might as well give you a quick update. Most of what we were just doing was just some quick target transition drills to start out, get this thing warmed up. I am happy to say that it did not choke at all on the steel cased ammo. Granted, it was only 20 rounds, but generally speaking, if an AR is going to choke on steel cased ammo, it's going to do so right out the gate. But no issues to report. Did just some barricade drills. Honestly, that has more to do with the shooter than it does the gun, or at least the optic setup helps as well. Really, as long as the gun does its part, you shouldn't even notice it as part of those drills. This thing was definitely getting hot, and it's still definitely still warm to the touch even through these gloves. One thing I'm impressed to see also is this thing does have heat shielding inside the handguards. Typically, when you go with the ultra cheap route, that's one of the things you give up. Also, I will say that I am noticing that this thing is pretty overgassed, although that's not terribly surprising for a carbine length gas system and just a regular carbine spring in the back as opposed to an H1, H2, etc. But I'm going to test it as configured. One of the reasons I didn't go too deep into the configuration on this thing is my impression with PSA, and I could be wrong on this. I might ask them before I post this just to get what their take is, but I'm going to say this anyway, is that a lot of the Freedom kits are going to change as time goes on, depending on where they can get parts most affordably. And I know Palmetto State is constantly kind of improving or revamping their line. So this is just a snapshot in time for reference. We are in mid-September of 2021. I forgot the date there for a second. But we're gonna go ahead and keep chugging through this thing, but I figured give you guys a quick update where things are at while I was reloading mags and everything. And for anyone wondering, in honor of Dakota Meyer, I went ahead and just wore kit to be out here to test it today. A lot of it's just to be able to carry mags, but also just to get some more time in. For anyone wondering, this is the Haley Strategic D3 RX 817 heavy, so they're 308 one. I wanted to be able to run any mags I wanted, including 308. I'm just running 5.56 in here, obviously. And I've got a battle belt setup that I've put together using like a Eagle Industries belt, Safari Land holster, taco pouches from HSGI, and a T-Rex Arms leg strap. And it's been working great. We're gonna do a little bit more movement style stuff next. Hopefully my footage is coming out okay. I was gonna have a friend out here helping me film today, but it's his wedding anniversary or something like that, so he wasn't able to make it out. So I'm trying to do everything myself here. Hopefully everything's coming through, and let's go ahead and burn another 180 rounds through this thing. We're just gonna make believe that's nice and solid as the Barricade. So we're another 180 rounds in. We'll go ahead and do a recap. Most of that was movement drills, as you guys saw from the footage. Things are still going well. This thing is getting hot. It was borderline too hot to touch, even with gloves up on the handguard, even with the heat shielding in there. So we're definitely getting this thing hot, but nothing crazy is going on. Now, I don't think I mentioned this yet at the beginning, but I did say that I was never a huge fan of the PSA guns. That was because of a lot of the issues that I had seen working at a gun store, customers bringing in their guns, trying to work on their guns. So one of the things I did before ever taking this thing out to the range for the first time, I actually, the upper came completely assembled. So I completely tore it apart and put it back together just to make sure it was done correctly. Not trying to make it sound like I know what I'm doing or that I'm an expert or anything, but I have taken a certain, like an armorer's course. So I feel fairly confident in my ability to put an upper together correctly. So I completely stripped it down, put it back together. The only real issue was getting the taper pins out for the gas block. They were unusually difficult, and they started to like mushroom as I tried to hammer them out instead of moving. We got them out, got them back in and everything. Made sure the torque was good on the barrel or the receiver. For the barrel nut, it was very well greased, so that was a good thing to see. I had seen a lot of them come in, but when I was thinking about it early on and trying to decide what I wanted to do, I realized that a lot of the issues that I've run into on the PSA guns, there's definitely been parts quality issues for sure and assembling issues for sure. But the majority of the issues I have seen on Palmetto State guns is the end user actually assembling things incorrectly and them kind of being at fault. And so that was one of the other reasons I was like, well, if I put it together, maybe we'll actually see what these things are capable of. And obviously this is just a sample size of one. But anyway, just to give you a little bit more of like the background of my thought process here. So for the last 140 rounds, I'm gonna make things even more difficult on myself. Again, we'll continue to burn this thing up and then we'll recap once we are all done with the first 500 and then figure out where we wanna go from here. So I want you guys to say hello to my little friend. So these are actually something pretty cool that I'm trying out today for the first time. These are some cardboard silhouettes from Birchwood Casey. Full disclosure, I paid for these. I don't think Birchwood Casey knows I exist. But the cool thing about these is where we're all used to shooting at flat cardboard or paper targets. These have a little bit of dimension to them. So whereas we're all used to, you know, your CNS shot being right in here, when I took a red zone class, which was all about CNS shots, when we moved to three-dimensional dummies doing UTMs in like a force-on-force situation, a lot of the dummies, when they were getting shot at an angle, were getting hit in the nose because we were all so used to aiming in this area here. What this allows you to do is get a little bit of a different target presentation and make sure that you're actually getting a good CNS shot. So let me move the camera and demonstrate. So now, because we're sight on here, you can see better that kind of dimension I was talking about. So if I was engaging from where the camera's at and I wanted to go for a CNS shot, I'm going to be aiming more back here, actually probably even, depending on my angle, maybe even further back on the head. But this just allows you to have a little bit more thought at your sight picture instead of just getting something in your sight picture, actually making sure your angles are actually correct for what you want to do. And so for this, I'm going to be, you know, moving across the range and further back. This will hopefully allow me to be a little bit more intentional about my shot placement. With iron sights, we'll try to get as close as we can, but it should just add an interesting dimension. I think they're pretty cool. They're a little bit more, well, they're a lot more expensive than your standard cardboard targets, but it definitely gives you something different to practice. So let's get started. Okay. It's kicking my ass, guys. That kicked my ass. Oh, sorry. Work through it. All right. Well, it's just over 500 rounds. I'm ready to wrap it up. All right, so once again, we're gonna have to excuse the noise, but that's it. We're just over 500 rounds through this thing. You guys were there for every step of the way. Now, my goal wasn't necessarily to come to any conclusions today, because 500 rounds is by no means an adequate test. I think of a rifle, especially when we're talking longevity of parts and all that, but it is a good indicator of things that come. My goal is to kind of present you with the data, let you reach your own conclusions as we continue on, and then once we get this thing really squared away, then maybe we can do a whole kind of culminating thing. This thing, again, my goal was reached to get this thing hot and continue to shoot it hot. The handguard is still hotter than I want to touch right now, hence why I'm holding everything down here. Again, this is a basic configuration right at $500 with the sling and iron sight. This is not an ideal setup by any stretch of the imagination, but we made it work. I did have some issues, especially when transitioning shoulders. The way that this sling is attached is, again, less than ideal, but it got the job done. And again, we went through 500 rounds with 0 malfunctions, including some steel cased ammo right out the gate. So again, I'll let you guys kind of draw your own conclusions, but I will say, at least up to this point, that I was cautiously optimistic going into this test, and I am pleasantly surprised by the way things are going. 0 malfunctions, 500 rounds. We did 500 rounds in just over 2 hours, doing some pretty just standard like testing, like what you would do if you were taking this thing through a class, although in an accelerated time frame, because typically even in a 1,000 round, like 2-day class, you're doing 500 rounds in like 6 to 8 hours. We just did 500 rounds in just over 2. So again, I'll kind of let you guys reach your own conclusions so far. This is definitely not the end of this. Next time you see this, we'll have invested another 150 or so into it. And we'll talk about what I'm upgrading when and why I'm choosing to do those upgrades at that point in time versus doing like something else. So next time you see this, it will be in a different configuration, but let me know your thoughts. If you have Palmetto State Armory ARs, let me know your experience. Even more so if you've actually run them aggressively, like taken them through a class. Let me know what your experience has been, because so far things are going pretty well. Now again, we're not fault-free, like this thing is definitely overgassed, but again, carbine length gas system, standard carbine buffer, the lightest weight you can get. We're getting, from what I could tell, about 130 2 o'clock ejection, when really we're looking for 3 to 4 o'clock ejection. That would be a simple fix if I wanted to up the buffer weight, but I'm not going to do that for this test. At least not right out the gate. Again, I wanted to test this more or less in its configuration with the minimum things I think you need to actually be able to use it on the range, and that's what we did today. So if this is your kind of first introduction to my channel, I have a feeling a lot of first timers will be watching this video as their introduction, and you think that this is interesting, definitely hit subscribe because I'll be doing a lot more with this gun, and obviously I do a whole lot of stuff with other stuff as well. So I'll let you come along for the ride, and by watching other of my videos, especially other AR reviews, all of which are far more expensive than this one, will let you kind of understand where I'm coming from a little bit better, hopefully. And you can see like the training classes I've done, and again, let you understand where my thought process comes from. I want to say thanks to my patrons for helping to make a video like this one possible. Again, while Palmetto State did provide the upper kit, I did pay for the lower, and with the help of Patreon, I was able to pick up 500 rounds to be able to run through this test, and then that will, again, allow me to continue on. If you want to help support this project or just my channel as a whole, definitely check out my link to Patreon down below, especially if you have specific requests of what you'd like to see me do with this. I'm definitely gonna listen to people on Patreon a lot faster than people in the comment section down here. But if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, go and throw that in the comment section down below. If you do have any recommendations or experiences or advice or recommendations of what to upgrade first, definitely let me know. Again, I'll do my best here, but people on Patreon have priority. Again, thanks to Palmetto State Armory for helping to make this thing happen. Like I said, you're gonna see exactly what happens as I experience it, because you're along for the ride. And that's one other thing too. This is the first time I've used my GoPro for shooting footage in a really long time, other than slow-mo for like gel tests or armor plate tests. If you guys like that style of footage, let me know. I can try to integrate that into more stuff. And then honorable mention does need to go to Duramag. All of the mags that I was using today were the steel Duramags. A couple of them, I put the Magpul little base plates on there because that's what I was running in my chest rig. Just make it easier to pry these things out. These things kept up pace right along with the gun because there's nothing worse than trying to test out an AR, having magazine issues be the issue, and then not be able to troubleshoot what is the root of the issues. But these Duramags held up great, and you'll be seeing more of those on the channel as well. But anyway, this video is probably long enough as it is. I hope you guys stuck around. I hope you found it interesting. But with all that being said, as always, I hope you got something out of this video, and I really appreciate you watching. Now, also for those of you who are curious, you can see what happened with this cardboard dummy here. Got some really nice CNS shots here from the front, and then got a little bit more wonky on the side. Obviously, when you're aiming at the side, you have less frame of reference for where to aim, especially when there's no hat or hair or anything like that, or ears. But just a cool idea. I don't know how much I'll be using these, but it does seem like a pretty cool thing to be able to integrate at different points in training.